What's up, everybody? Welcome to Tomatoito Boxing Show, and let's talk real quick about Saturday's card that took place out at the Co-op Live Arena in Manchester between Jack Catterall and Regis Prograis, where Jack Catterall was involved in what was a strategically tough fight for the first portion of the fight, strategically difficult for both fighters, but he manages to basically dominate the second portion of the fight, the middle rounds, and definitely the closing rounds, where he hands Regis Prograis the third defeat of his career, and potentially has brought Regis Prograis' career to an end. This is the second career that Jack Catterall has done that to, or the third career, I should say, and we'll jump into that. Very difficult fight to score, a fight that took a little bit longer to develop as it got underway. Usually we experience round one, round two to be the feel-out rounds. Definitely round one is a traditional feel-out round for boxers. And then they start getting those gears going. It took about 4 rounds for these two to start finding their groove. Both southpaw boxers, both very similar styles, with the exception of Jack Catterall keeping his left hand a lot closer to his chin, his glove a lot closer to his chin, higher guard than that of Regis Prograis, who tends to keep his gloves a lot lower. That ended up hunting Regis Prograis, not just in his last fight. It hunted him with Josh Taylor, it hunted him with Devin Haney, and now it came back to hunt him again in the later rounds. He started finding some quick success, but as he began to experience a little bit of wear and his battery started running low around the middle rounds, he started getting a little bit more lax with his guard, and Jack Catterall took advantage of it. Jack Catterall is very precise, very calculated, and when it's all said and done, Jack Catterall gets a 117-108 card and 2 116-109 cards, drops Regis Prograis twice in the 10th round. Regis Prograis managed to get a knockdown in round 6, if I remember, round 5, I think. It was the closing round 5. It's dwindling down, round's about to end, and Jack Catterall, they basically are in the midst of an exchange. Jack Catterall's on the reset, trying to exit out of the exchange. He exits out in a low profile where Regis Prograis manages to hit Jack Catterall on the inside of his right shoulder, as Jack Catterall was on a lower profile, loses his balance. A great punch by Regis Prograis. I'm not taking away from his knockdown. It was so precise that he caught him and managed to get Jack Catterall off his footing, off balance, enough to where Jack Catterall has to put his glove on the mat to keep himself up. And the referee acknowledged that, and Jack Catterall gets a knockdown issued to him. Gets the standing 8. They resume, answers obviously, and then the round comes to an end. By round 6, Regis Prograis found some success as well, begins to lunge forward, begins to press on the action, but Jack Catterall wasn't there to be found. And as the rounds progress, by round 7, you see Regis Prograis start to visibly slow down, and they have some exchanges, but mostly Regis Prograis on the counter punch and looking for the counter punch, looking for the counter assault, whereas Jack Catterall started pressing the action a lot more, started getting in his face, and also managed to counter with Regis Prograis as Regis was basically beating him to the punch. Regis Prograis was trying to not really initiate much action, but just trying to be more reactive than proactive. And Jack Catterall countered the counterpuncher, managed to sneak in his punches and beat Regis Prograis to the punch as he would exit the exchange booth. Catterall starts dominating these rounds, starts outlanding Regis Prograis, and starts getting up on those scorecards. By round 10, this is when Regis Prograis' glove should have been a little bit higher. He gets hurt in the 9th, and although Prograis has a little bit of success in the 9th, Jack Catterall started basically running away with this. By the 10th, he catches him with that left hand that he keeps so high up by his chin. It's such a beautiful follow-up punch that he has when Jack Catterall lands that lead right. Both southpaw fighters, Jack Catterall a little bit more veered off to angle off with that right, basically keeping him in close range to his opponent's chin and nose. And he throws it with such precision, an arrow-like right-handed jab that Jack Catterall has, and throws the sporadic left whenever he finds the opening or whenever he sees fit. But he's definitely not the most elusive fighter. He definitely doesn't have the quickest of footwork, doesn't have the quickest hands, but he's very calculated. He's very measured. He's very patient. He's very calculated, and he's very efficient and accurate. When he lands that follow-up punch, that 1-2 comes out like a missile, and he lands with precision, usually right on the temple, right on the ear, or right on the chin. And it's near flawless when he lands that follow-up punch. It's very hard for him to miss the target, let alone to not land a full effective punch. If he lands partially, he's still hurting because he continues to follow it up. And then as he's exiting, he's jabbing on his exit. So he continues to stop his opponents and keep them at bay, holding them in their tracks from being attacked. So he's very efficient on the way in and very smart on the way out, to where he manages to keep his opponent on his tracks. So Regis Prograis would try to counter and was still getting popped in the face with that with the right hand jab as Jack Catterall was exiting on the reset. Very, very precise. Manages to knock down Prograis in the 10th round. Hurts him. Drops him on his back. Hurts him. Prograis shakes it off. Gets up. He's still not fully there, but he continues to engage. He comes in, tries to get it back, tries to get back into the action. And as the round is coming to an end, Jack Catterall hits him and lands the exact same combination, the lead right hand jab with the follow through left. Again, hits him right on the button. He hit him just prior to that in the center of the ring, and Prograis managed to stay on his feet. And then he gets caught amidst this exchange as the round's coming to an end. And Jack Catterall successful again, drops him for the second time. It looks like Regis Prograis' leg buckles as he hits the ground on that second knockdown. And he started having some ankle issues. You could see that he starts stepping heavy. Even in the close of the 9th, there was a scenario where Regis Prograis lunged forward and loses his footing and hurts his ankle, because even though he wasn't making much note of it, you could see that he's stepping a lot heavier on that right foot, on that lead right foot, and it seemed like it was bothering him, but nothing of note yet. In the 8th, they end up both coming to a clinch where they both end up tumbling to the mat and landing underneath the rope on the side of the ring by the ring apron, and that seemed to have an effect on him, but not much. But we started seeing Regis Prograis slow down more so as the rounds progressed from the 7th and on. When his ankle actually got hurt, there's no exact moment that you could see where he got hurt, except for in the 12th round, if I remember correctly, where he just lunges forward at Jack Catterall, swings for the fences. Jack Catterall quickly gets out of the way, and Prograis goes lunging forward, face first into the mat. And he stays there for a few seconds, clutching as he's on his knees. And when he gets up, he doesn't get up exactly the same. At least the ankle is visibly hurting him now, and it's a lot more noticeable now to us, the viewers, that he was limited. That he was a limited fighter at that point. Regis Prograis finishes on his feet. Jack Catterall picks him apart in the second half of the fight, dropping him twice. He suffers a knockdown himself, but not to the extent of what he managed to inflict on Regis Prograis. Jack Catterall, well, he now lifts the international version of the WBO title for this 140-pound division, and is once again knocking on the door of Teofimo Lopez. Jack Catterall improves to 30-1. The only defeat to his career, to his record, came at the hands of that decision loss, that questionable loss to Josh Taylor. Nonetheless, Taylor retained his titles. That's the one that got away for Catterall, because Catterall would have actually been the undisputed champ at 140 if that decision would have gone his way. A lot of people cried robbery, this and that. Long story short, they engaged on a rematch that took too long to come to fruition because of contractual agreements, disagreements. Josh Taylor pursued a different path, didn't want to honor the rematch. Then it finally came to fruition. Then there were injuries involved and a surgery to Josh Taylor. And then it finally happened earlier this year. Jack Catterall gets it back and hands the loss to Josh Taylor. This time, no titles on the line. Jack Catterall was already knocking on the door of Teofimo Lopez, but didn't have that high of a profile. And then with the loss, a decision loss, well, that's how Teofimo Josh Taylor ended up happening instead of Jack Catterall. Leverage wasn't on his side. Now he's got a portion of the title, of the full version title that belongs to Teofimo Lopez. With Eddie Hearn in the mix, it looks like that's the fight that they're going to pursue. Try to get Jack Catterall with Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo Lopez experiencing some contract disagreements with Top Rank at the moment. Even though everything was on the up and up, in the past week, there's been some back and forth being exchanged where between Bob Arum and Teofimo Lopez, and some type of disagreement with the contract, with the current standing contract for them. So, if Jack Catterall Teofimo Lopez happens, that would be an amazing fight. It would be an awkward fight as far as styles go, but you got a Teofimo Lopez who is very squared, who could fight and punch with both hands, very elusive with his footwork, and a calculated, slower Jack Catterall that is precise when he lands that 1-2 and that follow-up left. Very, very interesting fight. That would be a you pick 'em fight, even though probably odds would favor slightly Teofimo Lopez because of his flashier style and the amount of weapons that he possesses. A calculated fighter and a precise fighter, such as the style of Jack Catterall, where they don't abandon their plan, they don't get frustrated in the ring, they don't just start swinging for the fences and panic. He stays very consistent in there and listens to his corner very well, has very good communication with the corner, where we've seen Teofimo and other fighters panic or abandon the game plan, or the corner just shut down and not know what to instruct their fighter when they start seeing stuff not go their way. And then we've also seen them dominate fighters. Teofimo Lopez dominated Josh Taylor. But he had a rough fight with Steve Claggett, even though he was very vocal about saying that he wanted to get some rounds under his belt. And had a really rough grind out type victory over Steve Claggett. Even though it was a one-sided, he incurred a bit of damage and delivered a lot of damage to Steve Claggett in that one-sided victory, retaining his title. But it should have been a fight where Teofimo should have come away with the stoppage. He had a tough fight against Jermaine Ortiz. And then sometimes he makes these fights look easy, and sometimes he has tough fights, depending on the style. And that's where Teofimo's at. Jack Catterall would be that type of test for him that could give Teofimo a lot of headaches. Regis Prograis gets the third defeat of his career, all by decision. He got picked apart by Devin Haney, where he relinquished his WBC title. And remember, Regis Prograis came to prominence in that tournament where he ends up losing in the final against Josh Taylor. That's where Josh Taylor ended up unifying titles and then further going to Jose Ramirez, where the big undisputed matchup happened at 140. Regis Prograis never got to fight Jose Ramirez, a fight that always got away from one another, and mostly for Regis Prograis, where he felt that he was chasing that fight more than Jose Ramirez. Never happened. Jose Ramirez is going to be fighting Arnold Barboza in that Golden Boy card taking place in Saudi Arabia on the undercard of Chris Billum Smith and Zurdo Ramirez. So, co-stablemates of Golden Boy, Jose Ramirez and Arnold Barboza, engaging one another. Arnold Barboza undefeated at the moment with a lot of promise in this 140-pound division. And Jose Ramirez, the veteran of the sport. So that's going to be a really, really good fight, similar to this one between Catterall and Prograis. It's kind of a crossroads type fight to where does Arnold Barboza skyrocket into title contention? and into prominence in this 140-pound division, carrying the torch? Or does a veteran fighter, Jose Ramirez, prove that he still has plenty left in the tank and enough in that tank to make another run at obtaining gold, at obtaining a title within this division? So that's going to be a very telling fight. Regis Prograis, at the post-fight interview inside the ring, he says that he might be, he understands that his body's not holding well in 12-round affairs, so he's mostly going to be, he basically just acknowledged that he wants to be a gatekeeper now. Maybe look for paydays, shorter fights, 10-round fights. He acknowledged that his ankle gave him problems and gave out on him, that his legs were starting to betray him in such a lengthy fight. So he's going to look for shorter fights, and he also made mention of maybe going to bare knuckle and visiting that venue, that platform. So it looks like he's mentally checking out from the top echelon of the sport. Remember what he did with Josh Taylor. He came up short on that decision. Josh Taylor took over the division following that victory. Regis Prograis, after that loss, put 5 victories in a row. 4 of those victories by stoppage. In those 5 victories, he managed to pick up the vacant WBC title against Jose Chon Cepeda. And in his very next fight, he ends up edging out a tight decision against Danielito Zorrilla. That's the fight where Bill Haney was on hand scouting him. He didn't look the great, but that's where we started seeing maybe some signs that Regis Prograis was starting to wear down. But he had a really good 5-fight run. Bill Haney goes and scouts him. This is what started... we started seeing that Devin Haney was potentially going to be vacating. Then undisputed lightweight champion was going to potentially vacate his titles and migrate north. Well, when they negotiated Regis Prograis after having scouted him on that performance, a lackluster performance at that against Zorrilla, they scouted him, they negotiated, and they met Regis Prograis in the ring, where it's a one-sided victory for Devin Haney. He picks Regis Prograis apart and becomes the newly crowned WBC champ. Regis Prograis on the sidelines until this past Saturday, and then suffers a back-to-back defeat again, not by stoppage. All 3 of his defeats came by way of decision. He's made it all the way to the end, so very good chin, very durable fighter, but definitely slowing down, and he's acknowledging that. Very good career on behalf of Regis Prograis, and it looks like now he'll either be a gatekeeper for the young fighters that are starting to establish themselves, but I don't see Regis Prograis having a shot at another title. Even then, I will tell you this, out of the 4 current champions at the 140-pound division, I would slightly favor Regis Prograis against Alberto Puello, who, yes, he is undefeated right now. He is heavy-handed, but he's a very slow and awkward fighter where I think Regis Prograis' style might actually pay dividends for him in a fight against Alberto Puello. I would actually still favor Regis Prograis, maybe against an opponent like that. Maybe we'll see Regis Prograis get his Jose Ramirez fight. If Jose Ramirez loses to Arnold Barboza, maybe he'll still have a payday there, and in a fight of 2 fighters that are already maybe on the back end of their careers or looking to be on the back end of their careers. But other than that, Jack Catterall stole the show, stole the narrative, and now knocking on the door of Teofimo Lopez. We have Alberto Puello with the WBC. We have Liam Perro, who's going to be putting his title on the line against the hot prospect in Richardson Hitchens. That fight, Liam Perro lifts the title, goes to Puerto Rico, to enemy territory, lifts the title from Subriel Matias, derailing, just throwing a huge wrench into the path and into the roadway of Subriel Matias as he was becoming the boogeyman at 140. Liam Perro put an end to that narrative, lifts the title from Subriel Matias, and now is taking on another very, very tough fight and one of the hottest prospects at 140 in Richardson Hitchens. That's going to take place early December out in Puerto Rico. He's returning to the site where he crowned himself champion. Liam Perro's proving to be, if he comes out successful and derails the ascension of Richardson Hitchens, Liam Perro's going to be the top dog at 140, in my opinion, maybe next to Teofimo Lopez. I would put Teofimo 1 and Liam Perro 2 at that point. Even right now, I'm slightly favoring Liam Perro, even though he hasn't defended the title yet. All new champions, except for Teofimo. Rayo Valenzuela lifted the title from Pitbull, and Alberto Puello got elevated from the interim version to the full version WBC champ at 140 after the whole Haney-Ryan Garcia debacle. He had a victory against Gary Antoine Russell. Alberto Puello did. So I would put Liam Perro as number 2. If he's successful with Richardson Hitchens, I would put him as 1A, 1B, Teofimo and Liam Perro. Rayo Valenzuela, we'll see when he returns. He seems to have switched teams now and left the Benavides team and looks to be an RGBA fighter now, Robert Garcia. That seemed to have come out on social media as well. So we'll see when he returns to the ring and puts his title on the line. Very interesting division. Jack Catterall and Rayo Valenzuela would be a fun fight. I would favor Jack Catterall slightly. Jack Catterall, Teofimo Lopez would be a really intriguing fight. I think Teofimo would be the slight favorite in that one, just based on the amount of tools and skill set that he possesses, or at least the multitude of tools that he's able to bring to the table. And I would favor Jack Catterall over Alberto Puello if they were to sanction that fight and allow Jack Catterall to fight for the WBC title. I think Jack Catterall would crown himself as champ over Alberto Puello, handing him the first defeat. I just feel like Jack Catterall's too much. That precision, not being so flashy, not moving like he does, but moving just enough, just doing the right things in the ring and being as precise and as calculated as he is more of a headache than the fighters that are circling the ring and going in and out and bobbing and weaving and throwing and pitter-patter and all this stuff that goes on when you're so calculated and they're so measured in their attack. A lot of times weighs a lot heavier because the fighters don't know how to go in, when to go in, and are always wary of that counter, of that left hand that he's constantly guarding and keeping it fully loaded, ready to unleash on a whim. So, Jack Catterall, 30-1. Congrats. He's knocking on the door of Teofimo once again. Let's see if that fight comes to fruition. Other than that, in the card, the only thing that I took, Hatton's kid fought once again, Campbell Hatton, and he suffers another defeat. So it looks like Campbell Hatton is starting to hit his ceiling. This is the second defeat of his career, and he lost to James Flint. And the only other fighter that I'm paying attention to, because I got to see him out in Arizona when he came out on the undercard of Sonny Edwards, Bam Rodriguez, is a young fighter by the name of Junaid Boston. And he's now 10-0, stopped a fighter by the name of Michael Samariva. And he fights at 154 pounds, stops Samariva in the third round. And he's also one of those prospects that we got to keep an eye out on that's climbing the ranks of the 154-pound division, the already stacked 154-pound division. I would put as the top prospect right now in that division, Sander Sayas. But then you got Yoenis Stayes. You got fighters like Junaid Boston that are starting to make a name for themselves and are starting to attract a bigger fan base. And then this past week, I managed to be out in Indio, California, took a trip out there, and got to see a young fighter, Gucci Mani's cousin, a young 20-year-old fighter by the name of Grant Flores, who also campaigns in this division and is now 7-0. Junaid Boston got his 10th victory. Grant Flores 7-0. He was involved against Luis Ramos in a very, very entertaining fight where he busted up, bloodied Luis Ramos, dropped him multiple times, and it looked like the stoppage we were headed for a stoppage, but the fight ended up coming to a close. Luis Ramos was strong enough to be able to finish the fight on his feet, and it was a 6-rounder. Grant Flores, the reason that he has a lot of promise is the way that he's fighting. For his 7th victory alone, the way that he's fighting, he is currently one of Israel Madrimov's training partners. He trains out of Coachella under the tutelage of Joel Diaz, and he trains and spars with Israel Madrimov. And Madrimov is headed for that fight. He's fresh off of that close decision defeat where he relinquished his title at the hands of Terence Crawford. A lot of people felt that Madrimov had done enough to have won that fight. But now he's headed into a war against Sergey Bohachuk. And Sergey Bohachuk, we just saw him in that war against Virgil Ortiz, where many feel that that was the fight of the year. This just happened in August. These two are going to meet each other on the undercard. Madrimov-Bohachuk on the undercard of Fury and Usyk 2. And Grant Flores is helping train Madrimov. I had an interview with him, and you could check it out on the YouTube channel. I got to talk to the young guy, to the young prospect, and the young man is humble and very open, very easy to talk to. You tell me what you think of that interview. He said that in 2 weeks' time, he's headed out to Uzbekistan to take part in the preparation and the early camp of Madrimov as he prepares for Sergey Bohachuk. This young kid just picked up his 7th victory, has 5 knockouts to his credit. And if he continues like this, he's already fighting like a veteran, and he's only been a pro for a little bit over a year. So fighters like this is the ones that I like to keep an eye on. We just saw Yoenis Steyes stop the veteran Johan Gonzalez. We've seen Xander Sayas, now Junaid Boston making a name for himself across the pond, and Grant Flores in the desert of California just sharpening his tools to and continue to carve his path as one of the prospects that should be considered in that 154-pound division, that if he continues in this route, he's sure to make a splash in that division in a couple years' time. Maybe by this time next year, he'll be a well-known name and a recognizable name within that division. That was the only other fighter. So Junaid Boston, congrats. He comes away with another victory. And other than that, listen, the 140-pound division, one of the best divisions right now in boxing, and where a lot of the lightweights started migrating north, and a lot of big fights coming up within that division. Subriel Matias is going to be making his return against a gentleman by the last name of Diaz, if I remember correctly. That's going to be mid-November, and he's going to be fighting in Puerto Rico, mid-November, but no longer with Panda in his corner. And it doesn't look like Eddie Hearn's going to be tied into this. No longer under Matchroom for some reason. At least not that I could see. It looks like a promotional company by the name of Box Stars or something of that sort. But not going to be a Matchroom event, and Panda's not in his corner, so we'll see what version of Subriel Matias shows up into the ring and returns after suffering that defeat at the hands of Liam Perro and relinquishing his title when he was on the verge of becoming the boogeyman and was already being mentioned as the boogeyman of the 140-pound division, one of the strongest champions there, and relinquishes his title by getting picked apart and beat to the punch and outpunched, outvolumed by Liam Perro. So we'll see how he returns. Then you got Jose Ramirez Arnold Barboza, which we mentioned, also mid-November. Liam Perro returning in early December. And then we'll see what goes on with Teofimo. And then we got to see what goes on with Rayo when he defends that title. Hopefully Alberto Puello will take part in the undercard of Tank Davis, which is currently slated between December, maybe migrating to January. But let's see if Alberto Puello puts that title on the line, and if we could get Jack Catterall into one of those championship fights, because he's there, he's knocking on the door, and he's in his moment right now. So we'll leave you with that. Prograis suffers the 3rd defeat, more than likely checking out from the top positions within the 140-pound division, and Jack Catterall knocking on the door of greatness within that division. So I'll leave you guys with that. Check out the interviews that I managed to get. Gabe Rosado was one of them, and another young prospect, and Johnny Cañas, who's making a lot of noise in Southern California as a lightweight. Long conversation with them, very humble kid. All of them were really, really easy to talk to. Gabe Rosado, I mean, man, what a pleasure it was to talk to him as well. So check those interviews out on the YouTube portion of this podcast. And I'll check you guys all out here in the coming episodes. Take care of yourselves. Have a good night.